And it came back and it said, you should be an architect or in military intelligence, which I thought was a very interesting dichotomy. And I thought, architecture.
Let's touch on that. You went from being a principal at a major architecture firm to working as an owner's rep after a pretty long design career. What motivated you to make that transition to the other side of the table?
So being able to see problems early on and help make sure that they're solved appropriately helps keep costs low, helps keep owners on a very safe and secure path. So you're saying that if someone sprays themselves with chemicals, they're going to have to go climb into a bucket and get in the shower so that way it doesn't go down the drain?
If and when the tariffs were really starting to affect the construction, you saying it started to affect it?
People are starting to be very concerned, especially when it comes with steel prices.
Today on the Onsitter podcast, we are going to be speaking with Desmond Belsas.
Belsaas, yes.
Belsaas. Desmond Belsas has built a career at the intersection of design, strategy, and advocacy, guiding complex projects from vision to reality as an owner's rep with Zurbach. With a background in architecture and years of experience leading diverse project teams, she brings a rare mix of technical expertise, big picture thinking, and an unshakable commitment to delivering spaces that serve their users well beyond opening day. In this episode, we'll explore how she navigates the challenges of balancing budgets, timelines, and stakeholder priorities while never losing sight of a project's long-term impact. This conversation is brought to you today by Map Solutions, helping architects, builders, and owners bring projects into sharper focus with high accuracy 3D scanning and modeling. Desmond, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Here, that's a very good company.
Oh, Map Solutions?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this isn't about that. This is about you.
Well, good. As it should be.
Speaking of which, we are sitting in a bank vault. Your bank vault.
You are sitting in my bank vault. Well, it used to be a bank vault.
Used to be a bank. Well, it still is a bank vault, even if it's not used for that.
That's true.
But we'll cover that in a future question.
Hey, how many people get to come live to you from a vault?
This is my first.
Hey, good.
For
You're
sure.
going to be calling me up asking if you can meet here again.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. So, after graduating from Ball State's architecture program and spending 15 years at Schmidt Associates, what first drew you to architecture as a career?
Okay.
Can you talk about those early years in design, any formative projects or mentors, and how they shaped your approach to bringing buildings to life?
Sure. Let's see. Start with the first one. What drew me to architecture as a career? I decided I wanted to be an architect when I was probably about 17, which is pretty late for individuals who come into the architecture world. Because when you go to college and want to be an architect, you really have to know that is what you want to study, as the program and education requirement is pretty long. But up until then, I really wanted to be a Broadway director.
Really?
I know, right? I loved technical theater. I really enjoyed the running of a show and just being able to bring something to life that other people could experience. And it wasn't until I took one of those fabulous tests, the career placement test you get in high school, and it came back and it said, you should be an architect or in military intelligence, which I thought was a very interesting dichotomy there. And I thought, architecture, it's like theater, but lasts longer. You get to design and build a building that people get to experience not just for a couple of nights, but for years, decades to come. So decided that might be easier than trying to make it as a Broadway director. Knowing now, maybe not. Might have been about the same. Architecture is certainly not for the faint of heart.
Gotcha.
And then, yes, early things. What started defining my early career? So I interned at Schmidt Associates, which was fantastic. Interned there. We all have a required internship as part of school. And they offered me a job right out of school. And I got put on a very large project. We were doing a $50 million renovation and expansion to Mount Vernon High School. And it was very much we're just going to throw you into the deep end of the pool and wish you really good luck.
Best way to learn.
It is the best way to learn. So I got to work on a project from start to finish. Even when I was an intern, I had gone to a referendum hearing for that project and then ended up being assigned to it as an architect. I got the opportunity to meet with teachers and faculty and talk about needs and take everything from early programming all the way through design and construction. And when that program started going into construction, it was right at 2008. So everything was in a bit of a slump, and our project architect on that project ended up being let go. So it elevated me from intern to, hey, you are the person who knows the most about this building.
Oh, wow.
So you're going to watch it during construction. and I about panicked. Very frightening, very interesting being the only female in a large table of nothing but older white men. And you're the one who's supposed to be giving direction and making sure that everything's being done appropriately. Nothing really teaches you to know your stuff like being thrown into those situations. So it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot very, very quickly, but it helped really set the stage for my future career. And the fact that I do that a lot now, and it has become more and more comfortable the more times that you do it. And you just have to trust in your knowledge and your instincts, and hopefully soar through somewhat well.
Let's touch on that. You went from being a principal at a major architecture firm to working as an owner's rep after a pretty long design career.
True.
What motivated you to make that transition to the other side of the table? And what were the biggest challenges or surprises you encountered when you first started representing owners' interests?
So I think part of my issue, it wasn't really an informed, educated, this is an intentional decision. It was more of I know that I can't continue doing what I'm doing. You climb really hard, you get to the top of the space and you're going, why am I here and what's next? Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know what was next, but I knew that it needed to change. And being a partner in a large architectural firm, a lot of times you have these lovely things called non-competes. So I knew that if I left, I was going to have to wait a year before I could do anything in the world of architecture and design. And so I might as well just go ahead and bite the bullet and step off the ledge and figure it out. Seemed like a really great idea. Still very happy. It turned out just fine. But one of the first things that we did is actually buy this building that you're sitting in. Decided I could use my design efforts, learning and really designing a building all by myself. And it was really the first time I got to sit in the owner's chair. So I served as owner, I served as architect, and I served sort of as the construction manager. So it gave me an opportunity to sit in all the different seats at the table and get an experience for what that feels like and gain an unbelievable amount of empathy for owners, because it's hard. It is very hard doing building projects with the cost and the expense that is involved, the risk, the nerves. And I consider myself to be pretty educated in the world of design and construction. And if you're not, and you're undertaking a project that's hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, that can be a lot. So you learn very quickly that things are going to go wrong. There are always unforeseens. There are always challenges that you have to face. And how you navigate through those is really, to me, where a lot of the excitement comes in. So I love solving problems. It was one of the things that I learned early on in architectural school, that architects solve problems creatively. So unlike lawyers who like to make problems, in my opinion, architects try to solve them. So if we're going to be putting people in charge of leadership positions, don't we want them to be those who know how to fix problems rather than make them worse?
Sure.
So I really enjoyed that. And then had the opportunity to start doing that same thing for owners, help educate them through the process, help guide them with an architectural team. Some are definitely better than others. And it's been very fun to just kind of really serve owners' interests and dig in still on that side that I think was my strongest suit, connecting with clients, understanding their needs, and developing really sound and creative solutions that solve those problems and issues.
Gotcha. So having now sat on both sides of a project, as the architect creating the design and as the owner's rep overseeing execution, how has this dual perspective changed the way you approach projects? And can you share an example of a time when your background in architecture helped you solve a problem as an owner's rep, or vice versa, of highlighting the unique insight that you gained from working on both sides?
Perfect. Yeah, all the time. I think it's very interesting. A lot of owners' reps tend to come from the contracting side. They tend to be even sometimes hired within the contractor's office and are serving as pre-construction, and they call that their owner's representation. But then again, you're still having your contractor be your advocate for what you're buying from them in the end. There's a very interesting dichotomy when you look at owners and architects and owners and contractors and the way all of that works together. Who's in charge? Who's making decisions? Where's the money coming from? That can make it very interesting. And knowing and having a background in architecture and design gives me a lot of input and ability to solve some of those problems that you see right out of the gate. So much of what we do and so much of what costs so much money when you're working on a large scale design project is not solving problems early. When anything waits till the end, the closer you get towards drawings being finished, or heaven forbid they're done, and you realize that you have a problem, everyone's going all the way back, sometimes to the starting point, to fix an issue and all the trickle down things that happen. So being able to see problems early on and help make sure that they're solved appropriately helps keep costs low, helps keep owners on a very safe and secure path. And I really enjoy trying to find those problems early. And I don't think I could do that if I didn't understand what I do about design.
So off the written down questions. As an architect, when you see another architect's work for a client of yours, how often do you find an issue, not an issue that's a problem, but an issue where you're just like, I wouldn't have done it like that? No examples necessary.
No. Perfect. I appreciate that. All the time. And it's very difficult to step back and say, okay, is this a subjective issue? Is it something that really doesn't matter? Am I being nitpicky or trying to make my own desires come across as what's right? Or is this really an issue and my expertise and what I'm thinking is the solution that we need to follow? And I've had several struggles with that. So yes, no specific examples. We don't want to get into that. Because sometimes people look at you and they're like, oh, yes, you are correct. That is exactly what you need. But a lot of times you have to prove it. And that really goes back to understanding your client and what their needs are. And so I've had several times where I've had to wait and ask my client to reiterate with their architect or design professional that this is what they want, because sometimes people don't listen to me. For shame on them. It would save them a lot of time.
No, for sure.
Oh, for sure, right? I'm obviously never wrong. But just kidding. I make mistakes. We call them unexpected outcomes, though. But part of that, again, still part of the learning process. So very, very frequently do I disagree. So I have to, again, gauge that. And sometimes it really depends on what the goals are. And it's easy. Hey, I love what you guys have done here. It looks fantastic. But you need to remember what our budget is.
Yeah.
What other options do we have? And the earlier you can start thinking about some of those things, the faster they can get incorporated. And the less the design team spends a lot of their effort and time and money doing things that are in an incorrect direction and keeping them hopefully on a path that makes everybody succeed.
So ultimately what's best for the customer, not necessarily what you think is the best idea.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Cool. In your roles as firm principal, now as project executive, and even as president of EIA Indianapolis at one point, you've often led teams that span architects, contractors, and clients. How do you go about leading and aligning a diverse project team toward a common goal when everyone has different priorities? And are there leadership lessons from your architecture days that still apply when guiding projects in your own direct capacity?
Yes, you're totally going to have to repeat the second part.
Sure.
I'll only do one at a time. So communication with diverse project teams. Very, very important. Communication is a huge, huge sticking point. And so many times things get lost as a miscommunication. Even back when I was working as a partner at Schmidt Associates, I ran projects. I served as a principal in charge. So I always felt like my role was to be the intermediary between the client and our design team. And it went in both directions, both understanding the client's needs. One of the best things that you can do is make sure that you have project goals that are clearly defined early in the process and that you are constantly going back and referring to those. If those goals are not well defined, if they're not clear, it's very difficult to say, yes, this works and aligns with the goal, or no, it doesn't. So the more specific you can be on creating those is very, very helpful throughout the entire project's communication. And then understanding that there's a vast difference from the technical nature of architects, even more importantly, engineers, and then the knowledge point and education of the client. And really, it's making sure that those two groups can talk to each other effectively and who can translate that. Architects use a lot of terms, industry terms that make sense to us, that don't make sense to an owner.
Sure.
So being able to take what both the client needs and explain it to the team, and being able to take what the team is producing for the client and I don't want to say dumb it down, because clients are not ignorant. They just need to have terminology that they understand, or how do you relate that to something that they do understand to get and make sure that everybody is on the same page.
Sure.
So to me, again, and a lot of that still goes back to your early goals. So it makes it easier to communicate when everybody is focused on the same path. What was the second part now?
Are there any leadership lessons from your architecture days that still apply when guiding projects in your own direct capacity?
Yes, I would definitely say So at Schmidt Associates, the biggest thing that we had was servant leadership. That was really the core value that Wayne had founded the firm on. And that was a belief that in order to serve your clients' needs and be able to lead, you first have to listen and understand what those needs are. If you're not in service to your client, then they're not going to allow you to lead. And that has very much defined my career, both as an architect and now serving as an owner's rep, is really understanding those clients' needs. So that way I can serve their needs, and in which case they will allow me to lead. And so again, a lot of it is just, it's empathy.
Servant leadership comes.
Empathy and servant leadership. Yes.
Based on your experience, how do different project delivery approaches from traditional design build to more collaborative methods impact a project's outcome? And having worked in design and now in construction oversight, have you been part of a project that tried an innovative delivery strategy, like design build or integrated project delivery? And what did you learn from that experience? So, yeah. I'm going to try that again.
No, I think it makes, I understand what you're trying to get
break it down?
There are.
Because I need to break it down.
Now you're just being sassy.
No, I need to break it down for me. But go ahead. If you got it, go for it.
Well, I think what you're basically asking is there are numerous design delivery methods.
Sure, yeah.
We have our traditional design bid build, which is what people have been doing for great ages here, especially, where you decide what you want for a project. You have your architects and engineers design it. They put together a set of construction documents that goes out to bid. There's your bid portion of it. Contractors and subcontractors bid on that. They give one quote. This is what your building is going to cost to build. You get to pick from all of those. What is the most responsive, lowest cost, whatever those goals and requirements are. And then they construct it. Ta-da, project. That has worked quite well for a long time. But there are people who still struggle with some of that risk. Did the architect do a good job estimating? Did they build a project within my budget? Are my numbers on bid day going to come in? Markets fluctuate. I'm concerned. What happens if my project is over budget? Then what am I doing? Am I coming up with extra money? Am I redesigning? Am I cutting things from the project? And so to me, a lot of the different design delivery methods just shift risk. And so you pay for that risk in different ways. If you're doing a design bid build, you're really betting on the fact that your design documents are accurate, that your architects, and if you had a CM who was overseeing that, are accurate on their pricing, and that on that bid day, those numbers come in exactly where you want them to be, or preferably a little bit lower.
Sure.
Everybody always likes that. But waiting until that final day as an owner, especially if you have a set budget, like a school corporation, you get X amount of dollars for this building project. And you know that you can't spend more than that. So maybe you start talking about doing a design build methodology where you reach out to a contractor who then hires an architect, and they design for you a package that they guarantee you often will be under a certain price point. So that way there's less risk for you and any sort of cost overages or extras that you might have. But at the same time, you're really relying on that contractor to give you good and accurate pricing and be upfront with you about what they think everything's going to cost, so you can come on an agreed upon dollar amount. And when there are issues with that, then the architect and the contractor have to determine what they're going to cut out of the project to stay on budget and not alienate the owner by making bad decisions and choices. So shifts more of that burden onto the contractor, which I still believe has to add cost. But at the same time, that's how risk works. Whether you're taking out a loan or building a building, there's always risk involved. So who is shouldering that risk? And you're always going to pay for it in some way, shape, or form. So there are numerous ways to talk about project delivery and what works. And it's different for every client and for every job. So I have clients that I've worked with who will do different types of design delivery depending on the size or the scale or the complexity. And they'll do different ones even within their own organization. So it kind of depends. But we're getting a lot more shift, I feel like, towards design build, which tends to work better on the coast. We're catching up here in the Midwest on what that means. But we're not quite as advanced as the way they're doing it on the coast. So eventually we'll get to a point where you just go out and you say, hey, I have this project and this amount of money, and somebody will make that happen for you.
I have my own curiosity. Who makes the decision for that delivery method? Or what makes that decision?
So it can be very interesting. So it is the client's decision on what delivery method they want. And a lot of times it goes into who is their trusted advisor? Who are they talking to about that decision. It could be me. That's one of the things that we can do as an owner's rep is sit down and talk about the various design delivery methodologies, what their pros and cons are, and where do you want to be. A lot of times we don't get brought to the table until late. Sometimes the architect already has a contract. The CM has a contract. The design delivery methodology has already been decided. And we have to make sure that the client is acting out of that methodology to the best of their knowledge and ability. But sometimes I would have changed it had they talked to me several months beforehand. And we could say, oh, well, for this is really what you want to be doing because of their financing, because of their intelligence level with buildings. A lot of people hire owner's reps because they've never done a building project before. Sure. And if you're doing a brand new $50 million building, you're like, I've never done this before. Mm-hmm. You might want some help.
Oh, yeah, it's quickly getting over your head.
It really, really is. So talking to someone like an owner's rep early is very helpful. But if that owner's best friend is a contractor, their thought process around what design delivery methodology works best is going to be vastly different. From a contractor's perspective, they like design build because they're more in charge. Mm-hmm. It gives them more ability to manage and control that project. I don't know of a single architect who'd be like, you know what I really want you to do? Design build. Because that puts the architect in a lower position in the hierarchy. They're really working for the contractor and not the owner, which puts them in a very different position. So this is part of why AIA has lots of contracts, trying to make sure that everyone's interests are well protected and have been well thought through. But it really, really depends on who you're talking to and then obviously what your needs are. So.
Gotcha.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that answer your question?
It makes this question make a lot more sense.
I am so glad that I could help you make your question make more sense.
I know what I was thinking when I wrote it now, but as I was reading it, I got lost a little bit.
Well, good. Hopefully I reminded you of your excellent thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So architecture and construction projects involve many disciplines, and sometimes it seems like each speaks its own language. You've emphasized the importance of open communication and keeping all stakeholders aligned. How do you bridge communication gaps between architects, contractors, and owners in practice? And can you recall a situation where a miscommunication or a siloed viewpoint had to be overcome to keep a complex project on track?
Okay, that one's kind of deep.
Let's start with how you keep them aligned. The whole communication thing.
Part of that, I think, is good note-taking and regular communication. I think a lot of times when things get misaligned, it's because somebody missed something, wasn't involved in a meeting that they needed to be involved in, so didn't get information in a timely manner, therefore can't solve or make a decision in a timely manner. And that, I think, can be a little bit of a sticky wicket. I'm trying to think of a specific example where a communication breakdown has caused issues and problems. I can think of probably many, but again, not specific examples. There's a vast amount of communication that has to happen for any project. So again, one breakdown in one part of the chain can make things significantly more complicated. Come on, Matt. This is very bad. This is a very bad response by me. What? You can cut out all my thinking parts.
Think so?
Okay, good. Communication breakdowns. I'm trying to think of one that specifically happened to me. But the one that comes to my mind the best is a friend who is an architect who's working with an owner's rep, not myself, and had a lot of struggles designing a lab space within a building and the way that safety requirements have to be implemented. So if you are working with certain chemicals and certain things, there are specific requirements for how you have to be cleaned. If you accidentally douse yourself in chemicals, can those chemicals get washed into a drain and therefore blend in with our water system? And in this instance, the architect had a very clear understanding of what the safety and material data sheet said, what needed to happen, and an owner's rep just wasn't clicking. And I believe the communication back and forth went something like, well, what do you want us to do? How are we supposed to test this? Like, we'll have to put a bucket underneath the shower and test it and run it just to make sure it works and then dump the water into the bucket. So you're saying that if someone sprays themselves with chemicals, they're going to have to go climb into a bucket and get in the shower so that way it doesn't go down the drain? No, that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that anyone has to climb into a bucket. In the case of an emergency, just pull the shower, and then there are other cleaning purposes that we'll have to go through to capture all that and dispose of chemical-laden water. But no, your staff does not have to, climb into a bucket during an emergency situation to clean themselves. So some of it is just, it can be very simple miscommunication. And sometimes people get very adamant when they think they're right. And it can get a little bit brutal and contentious between owners' reps. But again, they're just trying to protect their clients' interests. Nobody wants to be climbing into a bucket. It just seems like OSHA would probably not.
In your experience, do you have any specific strategies or techniques or just anything that you've learned to help you bridge that communication gap between the architects and the contractors and engineers? And
set a meeting. I will tell you one thing that I think is very difficult with communications when people communicate predominantly or only over email. And I think it makes it a lot more effective if you can get the right people in the room to make decisions and decide on things rather than bouncing things around.
In real time.
Over time. And saves on time, saves on effort. It's a lot easier to connect with somebody when you can slow things down, look directly at them, get other people's opinions in real time rather than spitting things out and just letting the ether kind of adapt and change. And then people often don't understand what they're getting back when it's written. Mm-hmm. You can often see that confusion in somebody's eyes too when they hear an answer that they just wildly don't get. And you can try to very clearly and calmly steer the conversation back where you want it to go. And it's much easier to do that when you're actually talking to people versus doing things all online.
Gotcha. Good answer.
Thanks.
I'll accept that.
Well, that's good because I don't know if I'm going to give you a different one.
You've seen projects that really soar and others that stumble. In fact, your team philosophy notes that integrity, empathy, and trust are the foundation of every successful partnership. Beyond those essentials, in your view, what factors make the biggest difference between a complex project that succeeds and one that falls short?
See, I feel like I'm getting really redundant here. But I'm going to still go with very clear goals and objectives. I think when you can get everybody on the same page from the beginning, it helps the entire project go significantly smoother. When you do not know where you're headed, you're going to end up someplace else. And that, I think, is when projects go awry. Or there are numerous projects where you might figure out those goals and objectives, but nobody ever comes back and talks about them again. To me, I want the whole team to understand what you're trying to come to as an agreement from the beginning, and then reiterate throughout the entire process of design and construction, keeping those things front and foremost. And I think that really helps drive successful projects when everybody's on the same bus, pointed in the same direction with the same purpose. And it makes it a lot easier to deliver successful projects when that happens.
Are there any situations where you can share where a project faced major challenges or even failure, and what you might have learned from steering that project back on track to success?
Projects. So sure. Right now, one of the biggest issues that we have with a lot of projects, and I believe this is a relatively wide industry issue, is we are facing a wildly, rapidly increasing construction market. Prices on everything are going sky high through the roof. We have tariffs on materials that are starting to hit and be recognized. And we're on the brink of a massive labor shortage for our construction professionals. Most of our skilled laborers are aging. They're getting to be in their 50s, 60s, thinking about retirement with no backlog coming in to fill those roles. So we've got people who are worth a lot, who are going to retire with nobody behind them, and costs of goods are still going up. So what we are seeing right now is projects that were budgeted a year or two ago are now running 50% over just because of these factors, not because anything has changed. So we have several projects that we're working on where we're trying to, I don't want to say redesign, they might not have even started design yet, but we're having to change the way we look at that project and the way it needs to be designed to make sure that we can fit within those budgetary requirements. And the difference is so big, that delta from where we were to where we are is so big that it takes everybody. It takes some concessions on the client's part. It takes creative thinking on the architects and engineers' part. And it takes really, really close estimating and understanding of market changes and shifts and dynamics from the construction manager's part to try to really bring all of these projects in a line so that they can still go forward. And some of it's shifting monies from one bucket to another to make sure that the highest ranked and those highest golden priority projects are the ones where the money is going first.
Gotcha. Cool. I was going to actually ask you if and when the tariff, without getting political, if and when the tariffs were really starting to affect the construction. You saying it started to affect it now?
People are starting to be very concerned, especially when it comes with steel prices, things that are getting brought in from overseas. Yeah, we're starting to see people who, when you think about a construction project, people are bidding on things that they might not actually be procuring for 6, 12, 24 months. So we're already starting to see those issues and contractors trying to protect themselves as much as possible, because you don't want to give a low quote on this for something that's going to end up with a tariff by the time you're ready to order. It's going to be 30% higher than you expected.
Is it a lot more unpredictable than it used to be?
Oh my gosh, right now I would say yes.
One of your notable architecture projects was the redevelopment of a historic fire station on Mass Ave in Minneapolis.
Yes.
What was it like breathing new life into that old landmark? And please walk us through that project. Any unexpected hurdles and preserving and repurposing a building? And what did that experience teach you?
Sure. So that was a very fascinating project. One of my longest ranged projects that I've worked on to date. I started thinking about that project before I went on maternity leave with our son back in 2011, and it didn't complete until 2019. So we spent a lot of time just prepping and getting all the dominoes to fall. One of the issues with that project, since it was a city-owned project, had the fire station headquarters, had a small chunk of fire station on it, had the Historic Firefighters Credit Union on it, was trying to get all of the dominoes and all of the pieces and parts that needed to get out of the way to happen before we could even start construction. And because it falls in a historic district, we have to get everything approved by IHBC, which is the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission, which was recently branded as Preserve Indy. Smaller, shorter, sweeter title. But part of their job is to protect the historic districts of our city. And being one of the largest new construction projects in an historic district that they'd ever seen, came off with a lot of scrutiny on who had opinions about what we were doing. So the project actually made the paper, the front page of the Indianapolis Star, as being controversial, and this is really what you want to see. At one point in time, we had planned for a digital canvas, so we wanted a piece that could show digital art, looking at the way that art is continuing to change and where are platforms to show more interesting things, and how do we as a city, Super Bowl had just done all of their murals throughout the city. So we were trying to tie into some of that vibrancy and excitement, but at the same time, he was going through a whole digital billboards platform. And so there were a whole bunch of individuals in those groups that thought, this is a digital billboard. This is a digital art installation. And lots and lots of contentious issues there. So we had to make a lot of concessions and a lot of changes to make sure that we did fit within the historic fabric of that neighborhood, with some of the elements or the, more edgy elements of that design. But I still feel like it ended up being a very appropriate development for that area. One of the things that we had looked at and spent quite a time studying was Mass Avenue as a whole, as being a very interesting and unique part of our city, and the fact that it really grew over time. It was a bunch of small buildings as early developing commercial properties, and so nobody built an entire city block building. They built a 30-foot wide building or a 45-foot wide building. And so we actually went and studied the rhythm of the avenue and looked at every single block on both sides and how wide were each of these old buildings. And we used that as the guideline for how we actually divided up our mass frontage. So we had sections that are glass or storefront curtain wall. We had sections that were brick, and we had sections that were metal panel. And so our brick sections tried to look very traditional, blending in with some of the architecture that was already on the avenue. And then they undulated with these glass pieces and these metal panel pieces to kind of blend that historic and new aspect, but still keeping with the rhythm of the avenue as a whole. So I feel like it turned out incredibly successfully. We got a lot of compliments. Joan Kinley, who was very involved in the AIA, has been very involved in preservation, sat on the Historic Preservation Commission for years, helped review that project, fellow architect, all sorts of great things. Gave me one of the best compliments that I've ever had for work that I've done. And he told me, he said, that Penrose project, that's the best new construction project that this city has ever seen.
Wow.
And I was like, dang, Jim, that makes me feel pretty good. He said it blends in, it does all the things that we want it to do. You should be very proud of it. So really appreciated that from Jim. I don't feel like he's one who doles out compliments on new construction as much as others, as he is very much a historic preservationist himself. So very, very flattering compliments. And I feel like we really were able to contribute to what Mass Ave is in a new and modern way, and really kind of create a building that will be there for a very long time that hopefully fits in for the next 100 years.
Yeah, that was a brilliant solution on your part for sure. So you took a whole building and made it look like multiple buildings just by changing the facade.
Tried to make it look like it was built a little bit more without faking it.
Sure.
But giving nods to that. It also allowed us to do some unique things with some of the fourth-story apartments. You can only build 4 floors of wood construction above a podium to meet with code, but you can create mezzanine levels or small sections that are raised higher. So we have a lot of lofted units, so we could actually bring our building up an extra story in certain areas to create better views and to create some really interesting units in that place too. So I think it was very successful, and I believe the owner was very, very happy, except for one thing. They asked that we have as few unit types as possible, as it's a lot easier for them to sell and market similar floor plans. Yeah. And, most of their developments have 3 to 5 unit types. I looked at him, I said, John, we're designing a building on a triangle in the middle of the city. I'll do my best. So we have 35 different unit types, which might have been a little bit more than they wanted, but I think what that building required just to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, you got to work with what you got. How many iterations do you recall how many iterations it took to find that balance between blending in and not faking it?
It took quite a few, actually. That project was unique, and because, again, city-focused project. So just like with any sort of request for proposal, they reached out to anybody who wanted to submit and received numerous submissions for the project and picked out a couple of their favorites, the ones that they thought were strongest. Ours was one of them. And they're like, we really like this. We really like your numbers, but we really don't like the design. And this, good grief, again, this was when I was still pretty young and early in my career. And I told my boss, I said, I'm going to take this. I'm going to give it a different shot. I'm going to give it a whole different feel. And so I stayed up very late one night with my trash paper and a ruler. And I just started going to town on what I thought this building should look like. And we actually had an event, a meeting, where several of the people from the city's selection committee came. And we got to present 2 different design options and say, here's kind of where we were going. We've refined it a little bit. And then here's another entirely different option, and we think it's stronger because of all of these things. And they all gravitated towards the new option. We're like, this is what we want to do.
Cool.
I still have that sketch. And it went forward from there. And it was interesting, again, the timeline for that project. So we had submitted something that we were happy with. City wanted something different. So there was iteration 2. The head of DMD, early in that time frame, really wanted something that was more vibrant and asked us to add color to the building. So we added color to the building. So there's iteration 3. When we took that iteration, after it kind of sat on the table for a little bit as the city was moving its pieces and parts around, getting the fire station moved out, went in front of IHPC, we're like, what is all this color? This is ridiculous. We don't like this. Excellent. Let's go back to what we had kind of more originally submitted. So there was iteration 4. But we don't like this digital canvas, iteration 5. So I would say, yeah, it probably went through a half a dozen pretty significant changes before we got to what we wanted. Um, but that's, again, part of that design process. And the other big challenging piece for that project, again, being that it's a half a city block, a diagonal city block is basically what it is, to create a double loaded corridor with apartments all around, and then have a courtyard space in the middle that's big enough to be usable. We requested from the city that they vacate part of the right-of-way on North and New Jersey. It's two bordering streets, to create a similar feeling to what it's like when you walk along Mass Ave. Because of that current site, there was supposed to be some green space and then some sidewalk. And we said, that's really not what you want in this area. You want to have more sidewalk, more pedestrian friendly, more of an urban setting all around this building. And the city agreed with us, allowed us to gain about around 10 feet on each side, which doesn't seem huge. But again, when you're talking about a city block, it adds up very quickly. So we were able to get a courtyard on the inside that allowed us space for a pool. There's a bocce ball court, putting green, and nice cookout area, lounge space, and really create a courtyard that was more open, and we could do more things in there and then have a very successful scale for that building, which I think works really well in the area.
Probably do something nicer for the people who live inside to look at.
As well. Yes, a little bit less tight, and we could increase our unit count as well, which was good.
So when you're not only managing projects for clients, you've also served as a volunteer leader and even as an entrepreneur. For instance, you are the president of AI. You were the president of AI in Indianapolis. Along with your husband, you opened Vault.
Yes.
Quote unquote, it's not a bank.
It's not.
It's a co-working space in a renovated former bank building, which looks amazing from the outside. Looks amazing inside too, but I love the historicity of the outside facade. What drives you to these kind of extra endeavors in the community on top of your day job? And how many initiatives like running a co-working hub or your involvement in AIA have influenced the way you think about architecture development and community buildings?
Okay. I have always enjoyed being busy. I've always enjoyed learning. And one of the best ways to learn is to be involved in things that are new, different, and exciting to you. So I have had numerous opportunities to volunteer time and service through various board initiatives. It was something that was very important to my former boss, Wayne Schmidt, and he helped connect me early on, which was, again, one of those straight into the deep end type of things. Hi, you're 24 years old and have never served on a board, but here, why don't you have this position on this nonprofit board so you can learn all sorts of stuff? Oh, here's another opportunity. Well, while I'm there, we need somebody to run the finance committee. Fantastic. I'd like to learn more about finance and budget. I'll sign up for that. But it gave me, working in areas outside of kind of my focus is giving me lots of opportunities to learn things that I apply elsewhere. You do finance for a small nonprofit, you understand how finance for nonprofit works. Then you go to do a project where you're working with a nonprofit who wants to do a building design and development, and you start to understand how their finances work, and you can talk to them at a different level when you have those kinds of knowledge points and understanding. And I find that to be fantastic. But I try to limit board and service involvement to no more than 3 at a time, as it's hard to give good effort in doing those things, to be present and to be able to commit that kind of time level. And I don't want to say that my things have been architecture adjacent. Occasionally they have, obviously AIA being a very architecture focused event, a little bit. But I also have had the opportunity to serve on the board of Indie Hub, of Arts for Learning, and finding other things that I'm passionate about that I want to either learn more or give back to. So Arts for Learning is an organization that provides arts programming for children. So I think it's very important as a creative who's obviously gone through schooling, watching people continue to lose fundings for art programs when you know how important that was to you as you were a youth and growing up, makes you want to find ways to support and make sure that schools still are able to have access to quality arts programs, because it's important for kids. Indie Hub helps young professionals get connected. I love connecting people, love knowing about what's going on. So that was also very fun. And then again, just looking for opportunities. So buying Vault was more of an effort for saving a really cool historic building, when we walked into this space, it had definitely had a really terrible 80s renovation. They blocked off the clear story windows. Come to find that they construction glued wood to them and then shot them through with nails too. So had to replace a bunch of glass block. They had put in a lay-in ceiling covering up all the beautiful historic plasterwork. So I had to rip all that out. Of course, they took no consideration into saving that plaster when they put that lay-in ceiling in. So there were just bolts just screwed into the plasterwork. So I got to learn how to repair plaster. Talk about a construction specialty area where there just aren't many people who do that work anymore. Find people who are really good plaster workers. Not easy to do.
I don't imagine.
I know, right? So learned how to do all kinds of stuff through that, but it's really just finding things that interest me and figuring out more. I probably get a little bit too scattered on some of that from time to time. In my mind, everything is connected, but in reality, they might be a little bit more disparate than I imagined. But a big chunk of it is, how do I continue to make more of a difference and put myself in a position that I can control those decisions? So I've been focusing on learning more about development. One of the biggest issues that we have that I feel like architects can positively support is the affordable housing crisis. So trying to learn more about what I can do to help make a dent in that. Obviously, I don't think there's any solving of this issue. There's just making dents and strides in the right direction. So again, just finding things that I'm passionate about or interested in and finding ways that I can learn more. And by getting involved with organizations is a great way to do that, because you're immediately putting that knowledge into practice rather than just reading about it and trying to gain some perspective. So,
gotcha. You mentioned programs and young professionals.
Yes.
Looking back at your journey from an architecture graduate to a firm leader, and now an owner's rep and an industry leader, what advice would you give to young professionals who want to make an impact in the built environment? Are there any insights you wish you had known early in your career, or a lesson from your own path that you could share with the next generation of architects?
Sure. For me, I think it's the same thing that you would do for any project. You have to find out what your goals and what direction you want to go happens to be. What do you want to do in 5 years or 10 years, or heck, even next year, depending on where you are in your career? And how do you design a path to get there? And the more clearly you can define that vision of what you want to be, or what you want to do, or who you want to be, the easier it is to kind of create the pathway to that success. And then remembering that changes. What I wanted when I was 24 is not the same thing that I want now that I'm in my 40s. When I was young and just starting out, I wanted to learn a lot. I wanted to make decent money. I was happy to work ridiculous overtime. And now I have 2 young kids, and I want to think about what their futures look like. And I want to be flexible, and I want to be able to enjoy these years that I have with them. So what I want now looks very different than, hey, yeah, it's cool to work a 60 to 80 hour week. Now I'm like, hey, you want me to work more than 30 hours this week on your paid position? Did I mention that I'm doing this volunteer thing? I have these 3 projects I'm working on, and I have 2 kids. So kind of sculpting that and defining that looks very different for me now than it did then. So I would say figure out what you want your path to be, and then go make it happen and trust that you can. I think we often suffer from imposter syndrome, especially women in this field. We see mostly men who are doing the things that we're doing, and it seems very closed off, and we wonder if we belong at the table. So keeping in mind that you've gotten here, you have earned this seat, and do with it what you will. So really encouraging young women, professionals in general, but definitely young women, to just take their seat at the table, work hard, and achieve your dreams.
Absolutely. I like that advice. Instead of just thinking about it, do it.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you can define it, it's a lot easier. If you know where you're going, people will help you get there. If you have no idea where you're going, it's really hard to help you along that path. So asking for help, seeking out mentors, man, there are a lot of really bright people. And really finding people who can teach you things. I like to always learn. It's just fun.
I mean, it sounds like you would make a good mentor, but you sound like your plate's full already. So how do you find a good mentor whose plate isn't already full?
Oh, goodness. If you find a good mentor whose plate is not already full, wow. I would be wildly impressed. I think finding a good mentor is really about taking initiative in doing so and asking. I believe that if you are asking someone, especially someone who's very well established, to spend time mentoring and helping you succeed, you better be really well prepared. Don't show up and expect them to give you an hour-long prepared lecture on what you should do with your career in life. Come to them with questions.
Sure.
Ask them how they got to where they are. Ask them what they think you should be doing. Don't just come with an open mind. Come with an open mind in an unbelievable amount of things that you want to ask. Make it easy for them.
Don't make them figure out how to help you.
Right. Help yourself. And if someone says, yes, I would totally meet with you, follow up. I can't even tell you how many people are like, I would love to get coffee or lunch with you. Great. Here's my card. If you can't take the initiative to give me a call and put a meeting on my calendar, I do not have the time to adjust to you. Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh, wow.
But it's all right. People are young and they're still learning.
So the last question is a bit of a little wild card here.
Ooh, bring me a wild card, Matt.
You've worked on everything from historic preservation to cutting-edge civic projects. So now I'm going to ask, what's one design trend, material, or architectural feature you secretly love, even if it's a little out of style or not exactly on brand?
I don't even know if I would call it a secret. So my biggest architectural, I don't know if I want to call it a style. I love, and I use it all the time, I use juxtaposition. I love two things that don't look like they should belong together, but do. In combining those differing materials, the differing looks, looking at something that's new and modern right next to something that feels more historic and old, looking at something really, really cold, like the steel in this room, but pairing it with like a nice warm piece of furniture, and having those two things that don't feel like they should really work together, but do, and using that appropriately, one of my favorite things.
Would you say that came into play in the fire station?
It comes to play in just about everything that I do. Which is also interesting. When I go, I've had the opportunity to be a juror for design reviewers. I have several friends who are professors who ask me to come and critique their students. And it is one thing that I'm always looking for, because I think when you play with that, it's what people see and notice about design, but they can't really put a name to it. And so when you can create those kinds of experiences for people, they really do remember them, and it tends to have more of a positive effect, even if they can't define why. So I'm always looking for that. And I think it creates just this really interesting balance and dichotomy when you're able to do that well.
Very cool. What's who's one person, whether you know them really well or just somebody that you look up to and admire, that you would like to see on this podcast? And what's a question you would like me to ask them?
Ooh. That's very interesting.
I put you on the spot, so I'll give
you. I know you did. I know you did. I'm trying to think of somebody who I think would be a really good fit. It'd be interesting to chat with my friend Lorenzo Giple, who was recently at the mayor's office working for DMD and is now doing business development for SME, which is an engineering firm. So you've got a gentleman who studied architecture and planning, has worked in traditional architecture office, has worked in development, wow, has worked for the city,
wow, and
is now doing business development for an engineering company.
Sounds like a great conversation.
Right? Lots of different twists and turns. And one of the things that I've not gotten the chance to talk to him about since he left the city, shame on me, we'll just have to get together sometime so I can ask him. But I would love to know what he got out of that experience and if he's glad that he did it. He had working for the city. He had reached out to me before he decided to take that position. So I think I'm intrigued in this. What do you think? I said, I think it'd be an excellent experience. It puts you in a very different mindset, working in government, understanding what we do, and knowing how that role affects the things that architects are getting, the RFPs, the question, all of that. And so much of what we do is collaborative. As you well know, there are so many people engaged, and in bringing all those players to the table and understanding how each of those pieces and parts works, I think can set you up for success. And so it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about what he got out of that and if he feels like that experience was worthwhile. Because, again, when you pivot out of the city to be a business development professional for an engineering firm, That's an interesting twist.
This is a big switch.
It's a big switch. So, do you get a little bit soured on something, or do you just feel like, hey, after experiencing all this,
Do something different.
I really like this realm more. Let's try something over here. But he would be an interesting one to talk to.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Hey,
Really enjoyed the conversation.
good. Me too.